Today we are going to get into the next stage of our trauma and loss series. We did the body and we do mind, and then we're doing the soul. So this is the third video for this week. So today we are really getting into the nitty gritty, guys. We've done 2 different weeks of talking about different coping mechanisms, how to identify stressors, how to identify when I'm having a panic attack and what to do about it. So if you haven't seen those and you want to go back and look, you can. There's all these very logical steps about how to deal with things. Well, this week we have stepped into more of the nitty gritty parts of dealing with trauma and loss, and a little bit more emotional aspects of it. Now, I'm still going to try to place this in a manner that's palatable for people and easy to follow along with and not too overwhelming. So today's work on the soul, we are going to start stepping into our understanding and utilization of shadow work, from fragmentation to wholeness, soul integration through shadow work. So I've pulled up some information for you all because I want to give you an understanding of what shadow work is. Shadow work, or the shadow, is a term that was coined by Carl Jung. In relation to Freud's id, Carl Jung had the shadow. Now, Carl Jung's belief about the shadow, unlike Freud's id, which was egocentric in the way things work and how we operate, Jung postulated that the shadow is not always negative or evil. We don't just hide, suppress, or push away bad things within ourselves. A lot of the time, we have hidden good things about ourselves, and that has to do with so many different aspects of how we've grown up. And the shadow was developed in childhood. So modern shadow work refers to discovering the shadow traits, forgiving yourself for them, forgiving yourself for hiding them even, healing from past trauma that has caused that to go into the shadow, and you process that in order to grow. So it's really just, guys, it's basically facing your demons, and most of the time finding out they weren't really demons. There are no monsters. A lot of the time it's just the fear of what you might find. And I want you to understand that shadow work is scary in what we think it's going to be like and what we think we're going to find, but in actuality we often find compassion, grace, forgiveness, mercy, and love within ourselves, for everything we've been through. And it heals that shame, and it heals that guilt, and it's the love that it covers all fears. It banishes fears away. So the idea of getting started in shadow work is very scary for people, and most oftentimes the scary part is the unknown. But the reality is it's pieces of you that you probably are missing and would be happy to have back. So I just want you to think about that. It doesn't make shadow work easier. It's still very difficult. But it's getting past that fear, getting past that first step. So we tend to see shadow traits, in other people very easily. So you can usually identify when you're around somebody all the time, or you have a family member, a sibling, a spouse, your children. It's pretty easy for you to spot it because it's something that they're not facing, but you see it. But it's much more difficult to find it within yourself, which is why it's in your shadow, where you can't see it. Shadow traits that your shadow might possess include, or these are signs, when it's starting to come out. Let's say you're in a conversation and you have an outburst, or there's anger and rage. Something about that conversation has triggered you. Well, we need to examine what that is. Envy, jealousy, manipulative, exploitive, selfish or self-centered, arrogant, egotistical, obsessed with your appearance or other people's appearance, and highly dependent on praise, intolerant, judgmental, defensive, overly competitive, or stubborn. Now, these all sound like very negative things and traits, but the truth is they're showing you when that comes out in conversation, when you feel like, oh, I'm getting too obsessed with appearance, or when you start to notice yourself, which is what we really want to do. These symptomatic things that are coming out they sound negative in the list and they sound awful, but what is causing them and what's being hidden is often not as bad as what we're seeing on the outside. Does that make sense? Like, you may be obsessed with appearance because you have a fear of judgment, because you were highly judged and criticized as a child and had to maintain perfection. Well, it comes out negatively in your 3D life a lot. But if you go back and look, if you really dig into that child and what you were going through and feeling at that time, you'll find a very innocent person that is very afraid of this negative thing coming upon them, and so they're super guarded and obsessed with maintaining whatever facade they've been told is the correct one, because there's a fear of judgment there. So what you see is that the shadow aspect isn't ugly and horrible and mean. It's needing healing. It needs affection. And then the 3D version stops. The obsession stops. The fear stops. The fear of judgment stops, because you've dealt with that shadow aspect and said, I can be authentic and love myself, and it actually doesn't matter what anybody else says or thinks, because they're not living your life, you are. They're not walking in your shoes, you are. And when you're unhappy, it has an effect on your entire life. So, isn't it better to be happy, even if other people don't like it? That's up to them. They've got their own shadow to deal with, and why they don't like things and why they can't control their behavior. It's not your responsibility to do everyone else's shadow work. It's your responsibility to do your own. Not all shadow aspects of ourselves are negative. They are merely hidden from view. We may have, for example, pushed down and hidden our emotional and creative side in order to not upset people in childhood. This side of us is not negative, bad, or a problem. It was a perceived problem for those around us who were uncomfortable with it. The reflection of their feelings and trauma is displayed as extreme dislike or agitation. For the one receiving this, there is a level of responsibility and shame, but it is out of place. The person who is upset is actually speaking to themselves while looking and directing that energy towards you. You take on the energy and disappointment, not realizing that they are the source of their own discomfort. So the shadow is developed and protects, hides, and shields the individual. Shadow work seeks to examine not just what we've hidden, but opens us up to understand why those who raised us did as well. So the ultimate purpose of shadow work is not only to heal yourself, but to have an understanding of what was going on in the first place. And it liberates you and it frees you, because you realize that you've got possibly multiple generations of the same stuff coming down the line, and it gets to you and you're trying to heal and process and deal with it. And you legitimately want to be a good person. You want to be a good member of your family. You want to be a good member of your work, your society, your community. And dealing with these aspects helps you do that. But it can become difficult when we realize that the people in our past, or the people who are eldest or elder over us, aren't and didn't want to do that. That's their choice, and we can't judge that. But when you're doing shadow work, you might understand why, and it be a better perspective to give you the chance to heal and forgive and grow past that point. Because when things no longer affect you, even if they're still going on with the other people, I promise it stops affecting you. You can get to a place where it just doesn't affect you. And it's not because you're inconsiderate or rude or don't care. It's because you've healed that part of you that was hypervigilant or concerned about their viewpoint about that. And instead you've healed past that, and you're like, okay, well, sorry you don't like that, but and so when you are acting authentically and you get past that point and you heal these shadow parts of yourself, you become an example to them. It might help them deal with themselves. It might not. That's not up to you. They are living their life and making their choices. But you can be free to be healed and come out of this in a productive, healthy way, like living a fulfilled, full life. what would it be like to actually have joy? What would it be like to be full of happiness? How would it feel to wake up every day and have your purpose and you know what you're going to do, sort of, and whatever comes your way, you'll just flow with it. And if other people don't like it, you don't care, and you're still being respectful, and you're still being kind, and you're still, being a good person to others, but you don't care as far as when you see their judgmental trauma stuff coming at you and they're going like this when they should be going like this. But you can see it now when you've done the shadow work. That's what, when I'm talking about the reflection of their feelings. When someone is using you as a mirror, and when you're a kid, you're an unwilling mirror oftentimes. So they're looking at you and they're saying, you, this, I don't like this, I don't like that, and then this, and you, and you, and you, and you, and you. I promise they are telling themselves, they're telling you out loud everything that they should be saying to themselves. We all do it. We all do it in arguments. We will tell someone else, you're this way. And if they were to hold up a mirror, you would recognize that what you're saying is what you need to hear for you. So shadow work asks us to do that work, and, in private or by yourself or with some trusted people. Do that shadow work for yourself so that you're not expressing it out into the world in an unhealthy manner. You're going ahead and processing it within yourself. So this can be very difficult with trauma and loss, but it also can sometimes be the best time to do it, because if it makes sense to you when I say this, it's like when you get past that fear point, when the trauma has happened, that which you fear has come upon you. It's almost like it breaks you open because you've experienced something, you didn't want it to happen, you hoped it wouldn't happen, it happened, and that bubble's been popped in a way that you're more open to start to deal with some of these things so that you can heal and be healthy. I'm going to give you a couple of journal prompts. These are examples of what shadow work is like. It is often done through meditation and journaling. You could sit with a friend, a very close friend you trust, or family member, and discuss it. Don't talk about it with anybody you do not feel comfortable with talking about it with. Okay? Because this is exposure. It's very laying you bare. It's very exposing. And so you want to be safe when you do that. And so that's why a lot of people use a journal and pretend your journal is your best friend or your younger self, and you talk to your journal, okay? So these are examples of journal prompts that stimulate conversation into shadow work. The conversation is right here. The first journal prompt is this one, and I'll put it on the screen. What was one time you remember feeling wronged as a child? How did you react? Has this affected you into adulthood, and how? So typically with shadow work, first we stimulate with memory, core memories, and then we expand from there. So if what was one time you remember feeling wronged as a child? How did you react? Did you shut down? Did you close off? Did you avoid? Did you yell and fight back? What did you do? And forgive yourself for whatever you did, because you just did what you could in that moment. How has this affected you into adulthood? Is it affecting you now? Are you fight, flight, freeze, or fawn now? Are they related? And so you go and you dig in and you look at that. Okay, number 2, I'm going to give you one more, and I'll put some more in the homework. Number 2, think about one time where you felt betrayed. What would you say to the person who broke your trust? Now you can say it from your adult perspective. Now you can say it after you've thought about it and dealt with it. Maybe you couldn't say anything when it happened, and you have carried guilt and shame with you over it. Can you let that go? Can you forgive yourself? You cannot go into the past. How will you handle this? Because you can rewrite that script, that story in your mind. Say the things you needed to say. Say the things you wished you'd said. Write them down or say them out loud and process that. Release the shame, release the guilt, and offer yourself forgiveness for probably not knowing how to react in the moment. And it's okay that you didn't say anything, but if you want to, what would you say? You are giving yourself the opportunity to explain yourself, to understand yourself better, and to integrate parts of yourself that you don't want to see. Now, I don't feel like, and maybe you do, it depends on how you're feeling about this, but I don't feel like these 2 questions were overly harsh or difficult. I think they can bring up a lot of emotions. We can go through them and we can feel a lot, but they weren't cruel. So shadow work is not meant to be cruel. And once you stimulate and ask that question, it's not so scary. It's really not. Instead of it being the dark, creepy basement full of horrors, you go down into the basement and you turn on the light and you look at one thing at a time and realize, oh, that was from childhood. That was from my mother's childhood. That was from my grandmother's childhood. You start to piece it and you realize there are no scary monsters in your shadow. There are no scary monsters to deal with down there. A lot of it is just memories, misaligned, misunderstood, miscommunicated memories. So I really encourage you, it takes courage to do shadow work. It takes a lot of courage. But doing shadow work changes so much, and it's because it's a different way of looking at things. We can tell the story of something that happened to us over and over again and repeat the same words. This happened this way, this. We tell that story, right? Well, you're going back and you're taking a different perspective on your story. You're observing yourself tell the story and going, we forgot about this and this, or what about this over here? And you start to really see it from a different angle, which changes the story you're telling in your mind. And that changes you more rapidly, more deeply than most other methods when it comes to, than most other methods. You can say things over and over and over again and try to convince yourself. And that can work. You can use affirmations. Those are good. They can work. But going through shadow work is to rewrite the story in your mind, which replays out in your life in a different manner. So I'm definitely encouraging you guys to do some more research and look into shadow work. Maybe consider getting a shadow work journal, or looking up some questions you can ask yourself. I'm going to post some in the homework. In addition to these questions, I'll post a few more to get you started. Doing this will bring you into a deeper alignment with yourself than you have ever known, because you will understand yourself, but it will also help you understand others and understand where they're coming from. And when we deal with these things, they can't trigger us anymore. And that's, we all would like to not be triggered. Now, there's just some flat out things out there that are awful in the world, things going on. But when it comes to yourself and your personal walk and your personal day-to-day life, it is good to try to deal with as many of the triggers as possible and find out why they're there, what they're about. Do I even need this? What was really making me upset? What was I actually mad about? Why am I actually triggered? We go through these things and it heals us and it makes us stronger. This way, we are not passing these things down to the next generation. Okay? Because this is a big job. You don't have to be a curse breaker and a generational healer, but if you are one and you've chosen and agree with being one, then this is a great path to go towards to achieve that and break those cycles, break those curses, and spare the next generation. Because what more could we do as a country, as a people, as a nation, as a world, if these things were healed up? Can you imagine the next generation if they didn't have this distraction? If they weren't constantly trying to heal from traumas? Which I know that sounds like a wild, fancy idea. But that would be a crazy world. That would be an incredible world when people didn't get triggered. And people were fairly wise and responsible and balanced. I know I want to be that way. So I hope I can pass it down to my kids too. So thank you so much for being here, and I can't wait to see you on the next one. I'll catch you on the next one. Bye.